Here is a recipe for fruit smoothies. Stefan uses the recipe to make smoothies. He uses 1 litre of yogurt. How many strawberries does he use? So in the recipe we have 250 millilitres of yogurt, but he uses 1 litre, and 1 litre is the same as 1000 millilitres. So we need to think 250 times what is 1000? Well, 250 times 4 is 1000. So in the recipe there are 10 strawberries. So to find how many he uses, we can multiply by the same amount. And 10 times 4 is 40. So he uses 40 strawberries. Now, Amir wants to make 5 smoothies. He has 1 litre of orange juice. How many more millilitres of orange juice does he need? So we can see that the recipe makes 2 smoothies. In the recipe, they want half a litre of orange juice, and half a litre is the same as 500 millilitres. So that means 500 millilitres of orange juice will make 2 smoothies. But we want to know the amount that Amir will need to make 5 smoothies. We can't multiply anything by 2 to get 5, or at least we can't multiply by a whole number. But what we can do is work out how much we'll need for 1 smoothie, and then we can multiply by 5 to work out how much Amir will need for 5 smoothies. So if we find half of 500, that's 250. So if 500 millilitres is needed for 2 smoothies, that means 250 is needed for 1. And then we can multiply 250 by 5, and that tells us that we need 1250 millilitres for 5 smoothies. Now Amir already has 1 litre, so he already has 1000 millilitres. So because the question asks how many more, we need to find the difference between what he needs and what he already has. If he already has 1000 but needs 1250, that means he needs another 250 millilitres. He needs 250 millilitres more. This graph shows the height of a candle as it burns. What is the height of the candle after 2 hours? So we can find 2 hours, draw a line up and then a line across from where it hits the line on our line graph. And we can see that's between 6 and 8 centimetres. But it's closer to 8 than it is to 6. So 7 would be right in the middle, but because it's above that, I would estimate that it's about 7.5 centimetres. So we need a number that is larger than 7, but smaller than 8. Now, how long does the candle take to burn down from 16 centimetres to 4 centimetres? So we can see from the line graph that it's 16 centimetres at the start. So we need to find the time when it burns down to 4 centimetres. So we can draw a line across from 4 centimetres and then a line down from where it hits the line on our line graph. So we have 3 hours marked here and 4 hours marked here. 3.5 hours or 3 hours 30 minutes would be this point here. So the line is at about 3.75 hours or 3 hours 45 minutes, because halfway between would be 3 hours 30 minutes, and then our line is halfway between 3 hours 30 and 4 hours, so that's 3 hours 45. Write numbers in the boxes to make this fraction calculation correct. So we have a fraction with a numerator of 1, a fraction with a denominator of 5, and then an answer of 7/10. So if we have 3 as our numerator, so 3/5 as this fraction, we know that 3/5 is the same as 6/10. 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 2 is 10. So then what plus 6/10 is 7/10? Well, that's 1/10, because when we add fractions with the same denominator, the denominator stays the same. So we can have 10 as our denominator here and 3 as our numerator here. Now, write two different numbers to make the calculation correct. So let's try a numerator of 2, because perhaps this fraction could be 2/5. 2/5 is the same as 4/10. 2 times 2 is 4, 5 times 2 is 10. So then we can think what plus 4/10 is 7/10. Well, that's 3/10, but we need a fraction with a numerator of 1, and we can't simplify 3/10 to a fraction with 1 as the numerator, so we need to try something else. Let's try 1/5. That's the same as 2/10. So then we have something plus 2/10 equals 7/10. So this fraction needs to be equivalent to 5/10. So we can have 2 as our denominator. 1/2 is the same as 5/10, because 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 5 is 10. Here is a rectangle. Calculate the size of angles A and B. So the corners of a rectangle are always right angles, and angles on a right angle add up to 90 degrees. So that means 34 degrees plus angle A needs to make a total of 90. So if we subtract 34 from 90, we get 56. So angle A is 56 degrees. Now, to find angle B, we can remember that Z or backward Z angles on parallel lines are the same size. So because we know that this angle here is 34 degrees, angle B will be 34 degrees as well. So parallel lines, remember, are like train tracks. If we extended them, they would go on forever. And if we have parallel lines and a line crossing them, then we will have angles that are the same. We could also work this out in another way, because if we know that A is 56 and we know that this angle here is 90, we know that there are 180 degrees in a triangle, so we could add 56 and 90 and then subtract from 180, and that would give us 34, because 56 plus 90 plus 34 makes a total of 180, and that's how many degrees we have in a triangle. A dragon lived in a cave. The dragon doubled in size every day. After 20 days, the dragon filled the cave. After how many days did the dragon half fill the cave? So if we double, that means we times by 2. So our answer is 19 days, because if the dragon half filled the cave on 19 days, then the next day the dragon doubled in size, and if it filled half the cave on one day, then it will fill the whole cave on the next day. The numbers in this sequence increase by equal amounts each time. Write in the 3 missing numbers. So we have 1 and 7, and to work out what the sequence increases by each time, we need to work out how many jumps. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps to get from 1 to 7, and the difference between 1 and 7 is 6. So with 4 jumps, we get 6 more. That means with 1 jump, we can divide 6 by 4, and that gives us 1.5. So with each jump, we increase by 1.5. because if we have 1.5 4 times, that's an increase of 6, and the difference between 1 and 7 is 6. So 1 plus 1.5 is 2.5, plus 1.5 is 4, plus 1.5 is 5.5, and then we can check plus 1.5 is 7. M stands for a whole number greater than 10 and less than 20. N stands for a whole number greater than 2 and less than 10. What is the smallest number that m times n could be? So if we want the smallest possible product, we need the numbers that we're multiplying to be as small as possible. So we know that m has to be greater than 10, so the smallest number that m can be is 11, and n needs to be greater than 2, so the smallest value of n is 3. So m times n, or 11 times 3, is 33. Now, what is the largest number that m minus n could be? This time, we want to make m as large as possible, because we want the largest possible difference. So we know that m has to be less than 20, so the largest number that m can be is 19. But n we want to make as small as possible, because if we have a number and we don't subtract as much, our answer will be larger. So we want to use 3 as n, because that's the smallest number that n can be. And then m minus n, so 19 minus 3 is 16. Anna has 4 different triangles. Complete the table to show the size of the angles in each triangle. So for this question, we need to remember that angles in a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. So first, we need to find the angles in an isosceles triangle, and isosceles triangles have 2 equal angles. So we know that one of our angles is 90 degrees, but we can't have another angle of 90 because then our third angle would need to be 0, and we can't have an angle of 0 degrees in a triangle. So it must be angle 2 and angle 3 that are the same size. Now 90 plus 90 is 180, so these angles together must be 90 degrees, and if the two angles together are 90, then each angle must be half of 90, so 45 degrees. Now we have a right-angled triangle. So remember, a right angle is a 90-degree angle. So one of our angles has to be 90 degrees, and then because angles in a triangle have to add up to 180, our other angle must be 10 degrees, because 80 plus 90 is 170, and then we need 10 more to get to 180. Now we have an isosceles triangle, and this time we know that one of our angles is 70 degrees. So because isosceles triangles have 2 equal angles, the other angle might be 70 degrees as well, because then we have 2 angles which are the same. 70 plus 70 is 140, and then we need 40 more to make 180. Now we have a different isosceles triangle, which also has an angle of 70 degrees. So if this angle is 70, we could have these two angles being the same size. Remember, angles need to add up to 180 in a triangle, so if we have one angle of 70, that means the other two angles together could give a total of 110. And if these two angles are the same and they add up to 110, we can divide that by 2, and that tells us that these angles might both be 55 degrees, because 70 plus 55 plus 55 is 180, and we have an isosceles triangle because we have two angles which are the same size. Ellie had a piece of ribbon that was 3/4 of a metre long. She cut it and gave half to Grace. What fraction of a metre did she give to Grace? So she started with 3/4 and cut it in half. So we can work out 3/4 divided by 2, because finding half is the same as dividing by 2. Now when we're dividing a fraction by a whole number, we don't need to actually do any dividing at all. Instead, what we do is multiply the denominator by the number that we're dividing by. So 4 times 2 is 8, and then our numerator stays the same, so she gives 3/8 of a metre to Grace. The other way to find half is to multiply by a half. So instead of dividing by 2, we could have 3/4 times 1/2, and again we would get 3/8 as our answer. John has 20 centimetre cubes. He wants to make a cube with edges that are 3 centimetres long. How many more centimetre cubes does he need? Well, if the edges are 3 centimetres long, we could work out the volume of the cube that he wants to make by multiplying 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So he wants to make a cube with a volume of 27 centimetres cubed. So he will need 27 centimetre cubes. He already has 20, so that means he needs 7 more cubes.